Um, a very warm welcome on my own behalf, and of course also on behalf of Mr. Bustdakin of the AMPO organization. I'm very pleased to have such large numbers here in this house. First of all, a few translation issues. We have, if I'm rightly informed, on channel 1 we have Russian, on channel 2 we have English, and on channel 3 we have Azeri. If you put on your headphones and you have the numbers next to you, then you should be able, if you speak one of those languages, to follow this debate. Also, warm welcome to all those who are watching at home, because this event is streamlined through the wonderful invention called the Internet. Of course, the reason for organizing this seminar is next week's presidential elections. I think a very, very important event in Azerbaijan. And for me and the people from UMPO, that was the main reason for organizing this event. Azerbaijan, I've been there a few times now in the last couple of years. I must say Azerbaijan is located in a geographically rather challenging environment, next to Russia, next to Iran, close to Turkey, Armenia, Caspian Sea, and all those countries on the other side of the Caspian Sea. It is really, really a challenging geographical location, but also from a political point of view, it's a very important country, and that's one of the reasons why I took interest in focusing on this country during my last couple of years in this house. Of course, we all know it's important because of gas and oil. That's the engine of our current fossil fuel economy, and Azerbaijan provides a lot of it. And not only its own gas and oil, it's also, of course, a very important transit country for fossil fuels that come from the other side of the Caspian Sea. To the EU, of course, that's of a very, very high strategic importance. We are desperate to diversify our energy supply, and here the whole region around the Caspian Sea plays a very important role. That is also one of the reasons why I have the feeling that the EU has a huge interest in having a very stable partner in Azerbaijan. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm a member of a party called Democrats 66. A high level of democracy and respect of civil liberties and human rights are hugely important for the stability of a country. And that's one of the reasons why I focus a lot on this issue. And to be very open and frank, the signs have not been extremely positive this year. We've seen popular unrest in the beginning of 2013 in several parts of the country. We've seen, and I quote several reports here, an increased repression of the opposition, of civil society, and of media. We've seen journalists being harassed and even imprisoned. And I'm extremely worried about this situation. I'm not going to speak a lot today. We have wonderful speakers and wonderful iPhones that provide the sounds that we need. We will focus on two issues. The first part that I will chair will be focusing on the current situation and the run-up to the elections and what to expect from the elections. And the second part, chaired by Mr. Bustdakin, will focus more on the way forward. What about the EU-Azerbaijan relations after the elections, and what about the situation within Azerbaijan after the elections? I'm very honored to introduce to you the speakers of today. We invited the ambassador of Azerbaijan to the EU, but he was unfortunately not able to come. But I was happily surprised that he arranged not just one person to replace him, but 4. So we have 4 members of the National Parliament of Azerbaijan here present, and one of them, Mr. Molazada, will take part in the second part of this seminar. My other announcement is that originally we expected Mr. Azanli to be here. To me, I must say, it was not a big surprise that in the end he was not able to come, being the main opposition candidate a few days before the elections. I can imagine it's pretty hard to fly all the way to Brussels to campaign over there. And this week it turned out that he was not able to come. But I'm very proud that we have Isa Gambar as his replacement. So that is not at all weakening our program. We have 3 speakers during our first session. The first is Cecilia van Pesky. She is an independent elections expert, and we'll focus on that. Then we have Isa Gambar, leader of the Musafat party, and a real senior if it concerns politics in Azerbaijan. I met him in Baku once or twice, and I'm very privileged having him here. And the third speaker is David Nichols on behalf of Amnesty International. And let's start. One more mentioning. I am a very open chair, so I'll allow debate after the speakers have spoken. I'd rather not have any debate during their presentations, but afterwards we have quite some time reserved for that. So, well, I think I don't have to encourage you to be active in that debate. Cecilia van Pesky, the floor is yours.
Dear Mr. Gerbrandi, former presidential candidates, members of European Parliament, representatives of the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, and members of the international community, especially from Azerbaijan, present here today. The year 2013 presents the South Caucasus with an exhilarating a year full of elections. All 3 South Caucasus republics are holding elections this year. By the end of 2013, Armenia, the elections took place in February, Azerbaijan, elections next week, and Georgia, elections end of this month, will have inaugurated a new president. May this be the incumbent president or a new player in the field. These invigorating circumstances create the perfect backdrop for an analysis of the current political situation in the region. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the 3 South Caucasus countries took their own fate in hand. In this, they chose separate paths for developing their democracies, safeguarding human rights, and boosting national economies. Although the paths that were taken were quite distinct, all 3 nations have been faced with hampering circumstances on the way to the so vigorously sought-after prosperity. Strategically positioned, the Caucasus, for many a century, has been theatre to a high-ranked game of chess. As part of this game, players have engaged in ways of enforcing influence over the lands of earth, wind, and fire. They have done so from the valleys in between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, and from the greater Caucasus mountain range, where Mount Elbrus encompasses all of nature's elements, to the rolling plains into Iran. In addition, sometimes overt, sometimes covered, post-Cold War players, Russia and Europe, have been interacting in wrestling of arms to see who in the end will be the strongest. To the west, Armenia remains under constant threat of escalation of the conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. The country is faced with high unemployment rates, resulting to approximately half of the Armenians living in poverty, rural people being particularly vulnerable. 2 out of 10 Armenians living in rural areas are considered to be extremely poor. To the north, in Georgia, the hot summer days of August 2008 brought a fiercely fought 5 days of war. Even with this particular war being over, Russo-Georgian enmities over South Ossetia could still reach a further violent peak. Only last week, after the EU's Political and Security Committee traveled to Georgia to pay a visit to the administrative boundary line of South Ossetia and to the EU monitoring mission, a mission that I myself was deployed to in 2010 as a human rights team leader, EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Lady Catherine Ashton, voiced grave concern over increased fencing activities by Russian security forces along the ABL between the Tbilisi-administered territory and the regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. In a statement issued by the spokesperson, Ms. Ashton said, "Such activities, which contravene Georgia's territorial integrity, create significant hardship for residents on either sides of the ABL and seriously challenge stability and security in the region." The High Representative called on Russia to remove the barriers, reiterating the support of the European Union for Georgia's territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. Only 2 weeks ago, while I was visiting friends who live in a small town right beside the ABL, I saw with my own eyes how concertina wire was being rolled out along vast stretches of the ABL. Also, I could see how a new military road was being constructed on the slopes of the Greater Caucasus mountain range. And at night, when I drove from Tbilisi to Gori, I could see the flickering lights over ever-growing and multiplying Russian military bases close to Okami on the side of the highway. To the east, in Azerbaijan, the security situation is hardest because of the country's less than friendly neighbors. Azerbaijan also has to deal with the West condemning the country's practices towards political prisoners and the lack of independent judiciary. Since its independence, Azerbaijan has been troubled by domestic power struggles in which dissident army and police forces operate on their own account. Furthermore, the Nagorno-Karabakh issue has overshadowed Azerbaijani domestic politics. The conflict over the enclave has constrained economic investment and trade and has resulted in the displacement of more than 700,000 people. Meeting the immediate needs of these IDPs had distracted the government of Azerbaijan from implementing meaningful structural reforms in key areas such as rural development, infrastructure, legal and regulatory reform, banking, and development of democratic institutions. Also, the dealings around oil fields and oil pipelines have been dominating Azerbaijani domestic politics. Even so, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Azerbaijan tried hard to establish democratic values and bring political culture to the country. But with no traditional political culture rooted in its past, and having been under Soviet Empire for 70 years, Azerbaijan lost most of the values it had accumulated during the establishment of the Democratic Republic of Azerbaijan. On October 15, 2008, the last presidential election in Azerbaijan was held. At the time, President Aliyev of the New Azerbaijan Party was re-elected with 87% of the votes in his favor. Several major political parties boycotted the vote because of alleged poll fixing and oppression of political opponents. More than 500 international election observers were deployed by the OSCE, the European Parliament, and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, PACE. I was part of the OSCE contingency that elections. In its final report, the OSCE ODIHR states that there was progress in the elections compared to the past ones. They even said it is one step forward, where sometimes it's 2 steps back. But that elections did not meet international standards because of the lack of competition to incumbent Aliyev. Mr. Temirhan of the election boycotting Azerbaijan Liberal Party added, "This leadership is not illegitimate and its election does not reflect the will of the people." 2 years later, parliamentary elections were held in Azerbaijan. Again, a high number of international election observers was deployed. That time I was not among them because I was deployed to the EUMM in Georgia. The OSCE stated that the election campaign had been marred by restrictions on media freedom and freedom of assembly, noting that many opposition candidates were unable to register themselves, thus creating an uneven playing field. Also, the pre-election atmosphere was assessed to be tense, with media complaining of pressure and non-transparent financial transactions of state officials. On E-Day itself, the OSCE observers reported numerous cases of ballot box stuffing, multiple ballots inside the ballot box, and identical signatures, one person voting for a whole row of people. At the 2010 parliamentary elections, President Aliyev's ruling Yeni Azerbaijan party got a majority of 73 out of 125 seats, meaning that for the first time in Azerbaijani modern history, not a single candidate from the main opposition parties had been elected. The opposition, Musavat, decried the elections as illegitimate. The events had nothing to do with elections. It was the most shameful kind of election. Ruling President Aliyev, however, said the elections were fair. The Central Election Commission said turnout was 50.1% out of a total of 4.9 million people eligible to vote. Opposition leaders suggested the low turnout was due to candidate disqualifications by the CEC and consequent discouragements to vote after their choice of candidate was excluded. There is a philosophy that the cause of every phenomenon should be found in the phenomenon itself. Proceeding from this point, I come to the conclusion that Azerbaijan is not ready for democracy. I have spoken to a befriended citizen of Baku who phrased it as such. This was in a Skype session in February. He said, "We are given freedom, but we do not know what to do with it." Democracy is a phenomenon that should be established in all deeds of a country. Democracy cannot be one-sided. It is a whole process, which is achieved by having a certain political culture and a wider world outlook. Legitimacy of elections...
Cecilia, 1 second. I hear someone saying that there's no translation.
No Russian?
Is there no Russian translation?
Ja, и горюет русский язык чуть-чуть.
Well,
At least you have the paper version.
Well, please continue, and we'll try to arrange it.
Democracy is a phenomenon that should be established in all deeds of a country. Democracy cannot be one-sided. Spasiba. It's a whole process which is achieved by having a certain political culture and a wider world outlook. Legitimacy of elections is a vital concern in this. Legitimacy as to how genuine the elections were run. So we're not saying anymore free and fair, how genuine is this were true elections. When it comes to the level of democratic development in Azerbaijan, I wish to mention one more thing. The Azerbaijani government holds a very poor human rights record. Arbitrary arrests, police beatings, and suspicious deaths in custody have been documented. The opposition can operate openly, but is frequently harassed, and so is the independent press. Political parties can be banned from the elections. The judiciary often appears to be corrupt and does not function independent. Judging from the various OSCE election observation reports, elections under President Aliyev have not met international standards. So I'm not saying OSCE standards, I'm saying international standards. Azerbaijan's 2008 presidential elections were seriously flawed and produced a legislature controlled by the president's party. The 2010 parliament elections, while conducted under improved election law, were also marred by cases of fraud. Election year 2013 therefore urges pressing questions of what future Azerbaijan, Georgia and Armenia too, are heading for. What will next week's election outcomes in Azerbaijan predict? And most importantly, what will be the next move of the next player on this regional giant board of chess? Having come to the end of my speech, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of this seminar of being invited to speak, especially to Mr. Gerbrandy. It is the peoples of the Caucasus, some members present here today, that are my inspiration. With their engagement towards the development of democratic values and the safeguarding of human rights, the countries of the Caucasus, ever so magical lands of earth, wind and fire, despite their many challenges, hopefully do have a brighter future ahead. I do believe that, despite the many hampering factors, but based on the persistence of observing the peoples of the Caucasus, that steps forward, a more democratic, more prosperous future can and will be taken. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. That brings us to our next speaker, Mr. Isa Gambar, leader of the Musavat Party.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Azerbaijan.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I will speak in Azerbaijani. As you know, we have elections on the 9th of October. This is not just a simple election. We are going to make several choices, fundamental choices that our nation are faced with. I'm representing Musavat Party. Musavat Party is one of the oldest parties in Europe. In 2011, we celebrated an anniversary of establishment of our party. And the members of ALDE party were representing on that event and on our different ALDE events. We have National Council, where different members of our intelligent people are represented there, and they are represent here as well today. Our aim is to go to the election with single candidate. That's why we have chosen one of that intelligent people, Professor Jamil Hasanli, as our representative and as our candidate for presidential elections. He's one of the famous professors in the world, and his books published throughout the world and in different universities. As I told, I was going to represent Musavat Party, but as we have one single candidate, I'm representing Jamil Hasanli here. We have given time on our national TV for debates between different candidates, and we have 10 candidates for presidency. but we don't have president himself presenting during our debates, and he's sending his representatives. Jamal Hassani during debates criticizing very heavily government during the debates. He normally presents what he's going to do if he's elected, but others are focused on criticizing him. Yes, it's strange that they are heavily criticizing him, but not giving any details of their programs, what they are going to do if they are elected. And Azerbaijani people are very, very keen on elections, and they're following elections very closely. But on our TV, government are trying to broadcast only what they are doing, their programs. They have created fake opposition who are given rights to go on TV and to represent opposition in whole. You can't see real members of opposition on our TV. Campaign period to showcase the candidates' programs were shortened, and it's impossible in 22 days to visit 85 regions of Azerbaijan. We, as the representatives of democratic forces, seeing that we know that according to the constitution, everyone can be re-elected only 2 times. Years before, there was a referendum to change this barrier for re-election, and it was and the limit for only to be re-elected for only 2 times was lifted. And we think that this restriction has to be applied not for this election, but for the next coming elections. We think that President Ilham Aliyev cannot be re-elected because during the 10 years presidency, for example, Nagorno-Karabakh problem wasn't solved. Different problems weren't solved. Economy in bad situation, and in taking into account all these issues, we're seeing that it's improper that he is going to move forward his candidacy for re-election. And it's against democratic principles. It's everywhere normal that you can be re-elected only 2 times. Of course, we can see in Europe that if the country is parliamentary republic, it's normal that chancellor or prime minister can be re-elected several times, but it can't be applied in this case. And summing up all this, we are applied for different international organization, European institution to catch their attention on this issue. "10 years Heydar Aliyev was in power. And after him, 10 years, Ilham Aliyev was in power, re-elected with the fake elections. Heydar Aliyev was in power in Azerbaijan during the Soviet period as well, from 1969. And can you imagine that one family is in power from 1969? Even if someone is in power for 10 years and he was the best president, he was excellent, he can't be in any case to be re-elected because it's against any principles. Corruption was rooted in Azerbaijan. Our people don't want anymore the monopoly in our economy. And to change all these things, to solve all this problem, we will vote for Jamil Asenli. And Ilham Aliyev declared several times that he is following the policies of his father. Election campaign are under control of government. They are controlling the local representatives of election committee. Elections were fake before. People were against before. And now we want to change. We have to change it. Politicians, intelligent people. But on the other hand, we need help, and we're seeing that on different international organizations, European institutions, there should be commitment from their side to help us. And government, Azerbaijan, when signing up different treaties, becoming a member of different organizations, have taken responsibility, commitment. Which they have to satisfy. I don't want to speak too long. We have fundamental values like freedom, freedom of speech, and other fundamental principles and freedoms. We have it everywhere. And these fundamental values are not against our interest. That's why we as democratic forces are going to fight for that fundamental values. I want to remind you an article of Solzhenitsyn, which was called "To Live with a Lie, Without a Lie." He was calling up people to fight for our values, not lying. We don't have to lie. If you are not going to say the truth, you cannot win. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gambar. Politics is about the truth, not just in Azerbaijan, but in every country.
Teşekkür ederiz Sayın İsa Gambar. Siyaset herkes için
Спасибо, господин Гербанди. Большое спасибо.
her yerde aynıdır.
Many of you in the room will remember that back at the end of 2011, we at Amnesty produced a report on freedom of expression and freedom of association and assembly in Azerbaijan, which was highly critical of the crackdown that we witnessed in 2011 to peaceful protests that took place. I'm very sorry to say that not only do many of the problems that we highlighted in that report still exist, but what we're witnessing at the moment is a further crackdown over the past year on human rights activity and on anything that could be characterized as dissenting voices. In particular, around the denial of rights to freedom of expression, association and assembly, and the direct connection between those rights and the conditions in which elections can take place. I want to highlight just four things for you this afternoon. The first around the activities of human rights defenders, of activists, of journalists. Secondly, around defamation laws that continue in Azerbaijan. Thirdly, here twice. Thirdly, around denial of the right to protest in Azerbaijan. And fourthly, around human rights organizations and NGOs more generally, and the denial of their right to operate. So firstly, on human rights defenders and activists and their ability to actually work in Azerbaijan. So at Amnesty at the moment, we consider to be at least 14 prisoners of conscience in Azerbaijan. That is to say, at least 14 civil society activists, journalists and human rights defenders who have been imprisoned solely for the expression of their right to freedom of expression. That's not to say there are only 14 in Azerbaijan. What we're also witnessing in recent months is that dozens of more activists are harassed or have been harassed, intimidated and threatened, including physical attacks by unknown individuals. One example, or rather, as part of this, what we've also witnessed is particular attention by the authorities to youth activists and a particular crackdown on young activists. And one case I want to highlight with you to demonstrate that today is the case of Dashkin Melikov, who is a 22-year-old youth activist who was sentenced back in July of this year to 2.5 years in prison on charges of drug possession, but which we believe to have been fabricated in retaliation for his political activism. This political activism included the setting up of a Facebook page which was highly critical of the Aliyev family. Now, during his trial, he was prevented from speaking to a lawyer. He was not fully aware of what charges he was actually had been given. The evidence was also not made clear to him. He was made to sign a statement forced to sign a statement, and in addition, he was made to delete those Facebook pages. At no point have the police explained to him or anybody else how they originally knew that, or thought rather, that Mr. Melikov was in possession of drugs, so what the basis of actually going to him in the first place was, why they decided to arrest him, why he had been, as part of this process, questioned about his political activity, and why he was also forced to delete a Facebook page as part of the whole process. The second issue that I wanted to raise with you this afternoon is around defamation. So Azerbaijan committed back in 2011 to decriminalise defamation. However, in actual fact, what we've seen is that the legislation criminalising defamation has actually been extended to cover more areas since 2011. In fact, in June of this year, it was extended to cover internet, social media, online activity. We saw the first conviction under these new terms in August of this year, where Mikhail Talibov was sentenced to 1 year of corrective labour for comments that he made on Facebook about the bank that he used to work for. The third point I wanted to raise with you is around the inability in Azerbaijan to protest peacefully. In essence, peaceful anti-government protests are effectively criminalised in Azerbaijan. There's effectively a blanket ban on such protests taking place in Baku, and amendments coming into force in January of this year have increased the penalties for unauthorised demonstrations in Azerbaijan. At the moment, for example, there are currently 8 activists who have had their charges extended just a few weeks ago in relation to organising a peaceful protest in March of this year, and are now facing up to 12 years in prison for planning to organise public disorder. Those individuals, again, at least one of those individuals alleges that he was beaten, and it's possible also that evidence has been fabricated in that case. And once again, as before, they were forced to sign confessions. The final point I wanted to mention was around NGOs in general and their inability to function in Azerbaijan. Already, but prior to this year, it was difficult for NGOs and civil society organisations to register in Azerbaijan. But now, following amendments in March of this year to the law, there are now additional hurdles that are required by NGOs to register and additional constraints on their funding possibilities. So what we are witnessing is that, that increasingly NGOs in the country are either being shut down or they're being denied registration in the first place. In particular, those organisations that are working on human rights and democracy or on political activity. So in conclusion, Azerbaijan has just recently concluded the Universal Periodic Review process within the United Nations, and the report was published just a few weeks ago. During that process, Azerbaijan said that, that guaranteeing human rights and freedoms was the highest goal of the state of Azerbaijan. What we're witnessing at Amnesty International, for sure, is the complete opposite of that. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, David Nichols. We've had 3 contributions. We have 20 minutes to open up the floor for questions and answers. Maybe you can indicate whether you would like to ask a question or have a statement. And if I give you the floor, please call out your name and tell the room on whose behalf you're speaking, and then you have the floor. The lady in the back, she already indicated halfway that she wanted the floor.
Thank you very much. My name is Kristina Morvai. I'm a member of the European Parliament, non-attached, in other words, independent member. And thank you for organizing this meeting. The main point I want to make is that I think whatever happens in Azerbaijan or anywhere else, an important thing is that the European Union should have no double standards when we measure democratic values and human rights in our different partner countries, but we should have uniform, predictable, and certain standards regarding all partners and regarding ourselves as well. Having said that, let me inform the members of the panel and the audience that as a non-attached member, I could not go with the observation of elections mission to Azerbaijan. I wanted to go because as a human rights lawyer, I like to see things with my own eyes. But since I don't belong to any of the big established disciplined parties of this parliament, I couldn't go because non-attached members simply cannot go. So how does it fit with our standards, what we expect from Azerbaijan in terms of democracy and human rights? That's one thing. The second thing, in terms of principles and values and double standards, United States. In a scale of 1 to 10, how would you, for example, Amnesty International or all other members of the panel, how would you compare the human rights violations and violations of democratic values in the United States, whether it's Guantanamo or whether the NSA observations of people, emails, telephones, and so on, which were recently leaked by Mr. Snowden, and the way whistleblowers are dealt with, talking about 35 years imprisonment of Bradley Manning and so on. Objectively, on a scale to 1 to 10, what is the scale of the United States and what is the scale of Azerbaijan? And is there any uniformity in expectations, given that the European Union continues all the relationships with the United States? When it comes to political prisoners, as a member of the Palestinian delegation...
Can you please conclude?
No, I don't want to conclude. I want the panel to conclude.
Yes, I know. No, then the panel will get the floor, but we have more people who want to raise questions.
Israel is an association country with the European Union. On a scale of 1 to 10, when we talk about political prisoners, what is the status of Israel? What is the status of Azerbaijan? Serbia is almost a candidate country. When it comes to dealing with national minorities, what is the situation in Serbia, the way they treat Hungarian minorities and other minorities compared to Azerbaijan? And my last question, concerning the 700,000 internally displaced people in Azerbaijan, as I understand, there were several EU, Council of Europe, United Nations resolutions. What has the European Union done so far in order to enforce those resolutions? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. To answer your first question about our internal rules in this Parliament, I totally share your criticism. I don't think we have the best system ourselves to organize these kind of delegations. So I simply share your criticism. On your question about the comparison with the rest of the world, I think that organizations like Amnesty are as critical towards those situations as towards Azerbaijan, but they are very fit to answer the questions themselves. David, would you like to answer?
Absolutely, yeah. I do think you're going down a very tricky road when you start to try and compare different countries around the world and how they meet, or how they compare against each other. What we as Amnesty do, as I think that the EU should also do, is rather measure a country against the obligations and commitments that country themselves have entered into and that they have, and then measure exactly to what extent they meet those commitments and obligations. And then also obviously the decision over which countries to focus on is very much a decision for the EU to take. But you're absolutely right that that it's not an issue for for comparing different countries and therefore focusing on certain countries because human rights violations are perceived to be more grave than in others. The question is about being consistent across the board and addressing human rights violations themselves, irrespective of the country in which they take place.
Thank you, Mr. Gambar.
Birinci sualla bağlı demek istəyirəm. Azərbaycanda bütün məsələlər üzrə
The first question. Freedoms are limited in Azerbaijan. Before, every party has a right to invite their own observers. Now this right is kept only after election committee. If our rights weren't limited, we could invite you as an observer. The second point, Guantanamo, Assange and different issues. I'm on the side of the Assange and I demand even now that he has to be freed. We are against, and I am against any torture. I was against any torture in Guantanamo. But I don't know, I cannot say anything on Snowden. I'm not aware of this issue. Yes, it can be the case that freedoms in other countries are limited, but we can't be happy because of this fact. And it can be used as an argument from the side of government. Freedoms should be protected everywhere. and Nazim Musavat Party were a member of the European Committee.
My name is Fuad Muradov. I'm representative of the Azerbaijani parliament from.
Bağımsız olarak Avrupa Parlamentosu'nda görevliyim.
I believe that if here in Parliament building we want to have a different opinion, so there should be some time for the representative of other nominees for the presidential election. This is about this. The second one, what's happened here? Just short comments. I don't want to waste your time. Here is one group who for and favor of Azerbaijani integration to the Europe, and another group who is against this. I'm very sorry that the part of the people sitting here against the Azerbaijani European integration. We are a new generation in Azerbaijan. We are for integration. We are for human rights. We are for democracy. And if some of these people sitting here around these tables can prove that one of the mentioned just recently, it's all blackmail. It's all about the stop Azerbaijan for integration. It's all about the stop Azerbaijani to be independent, strong countries. It's all about interest of some other countries in Azerbaijan. And my question is very simple. Mr. Gambarov was in power a long time. But during this time when they was in power, Azerbaijan was the poorest country in the region, the poorest country with the high unemployment rate. But now, Azerbaijan is a champion in the region. Azerbaijan GDP is one of the best, was in 2009. It is not issue of the Azerbaijani want or Azerbaijani don't want to be integrated. It's the issue of the obstacles making for us. We are for dialogue, we are for debates, we are for discussion. And coming back to the question, my question is very simple. It's a question to Mr. Buzdashin, who is sitting there, from the General Secretary of the Unrepresented Nations. What happened in Azerbaijan? What is the problem with the Azerbaijan election and national minorities in Azerbaijan? Mr. Gambarov sitting here together with the people who want separatism in the region. Is it what we want in my country? No. I don't want my country divided in 10, 15 gubernia like it's some of the people mentioned here. That's the reason why we're here, and that's the reason why we want to discuss it here. I'm very sorry that part of these people, they are participate in this game. It's game against Azerbaijani integrity. It's game against Azerbaijani to be an independent and strong country. And about Nagorno-Karabakh, when in this building we discussed this issue about the occupation of the territory, my question to Amnesty, can you call Armenia aggressor? Can you call this territory occupied? No. If yes, please give me your position of the Amnesty International. What is the position of the Amnesty International of the 20% of occupation of Azerbaijan? About 1 million of IDPs and refugees. Where is your position? And that's why my last remark, we are, Mr. Gerbrandy, ready for discussion. But sometimes it's one side. Because we come here for discuss, for dialogue, and spread our opinions. Thank you for giving this chance to me to say about this. About the election, here you see, the topic is Azerbaijani president election, but we didn't have a chance to talk about this. Because so many and so much blackmails against Azerbaijan, against the nations, I never heard that the people who want changes starting to blame country for the Euro integration, for being a champion in economy, for being the best GDP in the region, for being the best partner of Europe, for supplying the good life of the people of the Europe. And I hope and I believe that our next discussion will be about the possibilities of Azerbaijan to more integrated in Europe, possibility of the young people travel to the Europe and studying here like Azerbaijan will do it. President Aliyev for development of Azerbaijan and President Aliyev for integration process of Azerbaijan in Europe. And Azerbaijan never be strong like that. And I'm proud of my country. And I invite all of the people around here who for many reasons against my country to be a real and based on the statistics, because this is something we cannot cheat. I thanks again for the observers who will come to Azerbaijan, the European Parliament part of this process. We send invitation to all of the international organizations. There are no any limitation to come to Azerbaijan. According to the OGHR midterm report, just recently they published, about the Central Commission, Central Election Commission, there are no any problem with the implementing of the Azerbaijani rules and laws. This is what OGHR report was about. About the general remarks that it can be better, of course, it can be better, but we work on this. We don't want to divide our countries 5, 6 different regions, and tomorrow we come here and say, so what we do for keeping Azerbaijan in right track? So we are ready to discuss this issue. We had the platforms for this. We have the Euronest Parliament Assembly. We have Parliament Cooperation Committee. But unfortunately, when we came to discussion in that platforms, here in European Parliament, there's never time for the open and right discussion. And the national minority in Azerbaijan live in peace, and it's model now, in not only in Europe, it's model in the world now about the tolerance and intercultural issue in Azerbaijan. I believe that all of this dirty game against Azerbaijan will not continue, and I believe that I know that next year is Parliament election in Europe, European Parliament election, and I know for some of the MP it's good showing up to be one of the part of the campaign, maybe, but my country is not for campaign. Me and people like me in Azerbaijan, we absolute majority in Azerbaijan. And weaknesses of the opposition, they try to reason it because of the referendums, parliament. Jamil Hassanli was part of our parliament, He's sitting in the same row with us. And if the parliament was illegitimate, why he's sitting there? This is a question which maybe I know that there are no answer for that. So my last question, I finished. My question about Amnesty International. Do they recognize Armenia as occupants, as aggressor? Do they recognize Azerbaijani territory occupied? And my question to unrepresented nations, Secretary General, what he is seeing and what is in agenda about Azerbaijan? What's the problem they face in Azerbaijan if they face it? And about the election, I believe that we will see your report about the election, and I believe that it will be based on the facts, not about the rumors on the different unrecognized newspapers and yellow papers, but I believe that we can discuss this also because we are ready for discussion. The readiness of Azerbaijani MPs, of the government, I believe also, it's always for Azerbaijani future. It's always for Azerbaijani strongest. Some of the region and countries around us don't like to be Azerbaijan independent and strong, but we don't allow to anyone to disturb our stability, and we don't allow anyone to divide our country. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muradov. First of all, I gave you all the time you wanted in order to show that we are open for debate. And I'm not sure if I've given you more airtime than the opposition at Azeri television, but that's something else. In political debate, you can have different opinions, and you can fight about that. And I think that is the good thing about political debate, because then people have a choice. What I do not like is calling the other side or blaming them of dirty games, blackmailing, etc. That is not the kind of political debate that I would like to see. So I gave you all the time. I'm not going to respond to your remarks because we have an expert panel that can do so. I think you would all like to respond. I would like to start with Mr. Nichols from Amnesty.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the direct question as well. I'm sorry that I'm not going to fulfill you in terms of the answer. I think that most in the room would agree that it's not our job, it's not our role to determine whether or not somewhere is occupied. It's simply not the job of a human rights organisation like Amnesty International. What we do is reflect internationally agreed language around issues such as this, which is what we do in all of our reports, and it's what we do in equivalent situations.
Bizim sorunumuz
issues such as this. Sorry.
Cecilia, yes?
My comment would be more geared towards the comments that you made on the elections. And I heard you say that
biz duyduk ki
electoral law has improved, and indeed it has. Also, the OSCE reports are mentioning this. But what we see in many countries, not only in Azerbaijan, is that the difficulties are kind of, they are shifted towards the end of the process on election day. So the cases of fraud during the day, as I mentioned, the ballot box stuffing, the identical signatures, we see them getting less and less, fortunately, also because of the presence of observers already for many years, 20 years already. But we see that the problems at the end of the process on E-Day, that they are growing. So it comes to the process of tabulation, of counting the votes in the end. So I think even though the
suçlar, yapılan seçilmeler sonucu
be quite a lot of energy process on E-Day when it comes to the establishing the election results. And I think within the neighborhood policy, we have already seen that there has been guidance of the EU towards this process in Azerbaijan. So I would say we can mention that there is good cooperation in that sense and good dialogue as well. And I do very much appreciate your emphasis on wanting to have this dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cecilia. Mr. Bustakin will chair the next session, and he will take the issue there. Mr. Gamba.
Cənab Fuad Muradovun dediklerinden yalnız Qarabağ məsələsində bizim mövqeyimiz demək olar ki, eynidir.
From what Mr. Fuad Muradov said, we agree only on the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh. And we agree on his point that there should not be any single approach towards occupant Armenia and occupied Azerbaijan. But I have to say that when we will have democracy in Azerbaijan, we can solve this problem with our democracy, not without. He's blaming me to sit besides with separatists, but if there are someone who is separatist here, let me know. I don't know. We can talk about this later during the second panel. He mentioned that in 1992 and 93, Azerbaijan was poor and now we're rich. But you are rich today because of the oil. When we were rich in 1992, 1993 with our reforms, and we were leading other CIS countries. We were on the first place. European Reconstruction Bank says it, not we. Mr. Muradov said that there are people who are for and against European integration. But I can say that as a representative of Musawa Party, we were always for integration, for Euro-Atlantic integration. 100 years ago, this approach was established by our party. They say that we cooperate with NATO, but we don't want to become a member. We want to cooperate with European Union, but we don't want to be a member. This is what you call European integration. Many analytics say that Azerbaijan is like a student who failed several years in university. Negotiations are going to regarding the association agreement, and we didn't progress in this way. We are on the level of Belarus and other countries. In this case, you see my approach and your approach towards European integration. We as a opposition party always declared that we are ready for dialogue and to talk on different issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking at the clock. I see many hands up, but I also know that we will continue the debate after the next session. So my proposal is to quickly move over to the next session, which means that I give Mr. Busdakin the chair, and that we continue our debate, which might be touching upon the same issues after the second session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. For first, I would like to thank Mr. Gerbrandy for his devoted cooperation in organizing this event and all the speakers who will contribute to today's panels. At a moment when Azerbaijan is moving even closer to the European Union, addressing the question of democracy and human rights in the country, here at the heart of European decision-making, is indeed of utmost importance. In Azerbaijan, UNPO represents the largest minority group residing in the country, namely the Lesgin people. As in the past, the Talish people was member of UNPO, an indigenous Caucasian ethnic group divided between northern Azerbaijan and the southern Dagestan in the Republic of the Russian Federation. Incumbent Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev's tenure has brought great prosperity to Azerbaijan, this is undoubtable, and has seen the country's relationship to the European Union grow closer in recent years. However, this has come at high price. Widespread human rights abuse and corruption are commonplace, and with the election rapidly approaching, authorities have increasingly turned their focus toward silencing criticism. Furthermore, and I'd like to quote a Human Rights Watch report, has noted in a newly released report, September 2013, that the sheer number of arrests, the adoption of harsher laws, and extensive government efforts to stop and prevent peaceful public protest indicate a new concerted government effort to curtail political and civic activism in the country. In this context, sir, UNPO regrettably observed during a fact-finding mission to Azerbaijan in late August this year that minority groups have been particularly targeted. A report on the findings of the mission can be found at the welcome desk and been disseminated to all of you. Although Azerbaijan is officially committed to the protection of minority rights, I'm sorry, sir, if you are listening, I'm trying to responding to you. You made a question to me even before I start talking. Now, if you are listening, probably you will understand what I mean.
I am listening to you.
Yes, thank you.
Is my right to listen or no?
No, don't interrupt me. Listen, not interrupt. Listen, not interrupt. That is not correct from your point. I repeat, although Azerbaijan is officially committed to the protection of minority rights through the country constitution and ratification of the Council of Europe Framework Convention on National Minority, not UNPO, not other representative here. Your by law and the ratification on the Council of Europe Framework Convention on National Minorities. In reality, it is impossible for minority groups, including the Lezgin, the Farsi-speaking Talis and the Avars, and many others, to express their identity, being through culture, politics, or business. Energy has become one of the major issues in the Azerbaijani-EU relationship. However, if the European Union wishes not only to serve its economic interests, but also live up with its core values of democracy, rule of law and respect of human rights, increased and continued attention must be given to the grave situation facing opposition activities and minority groups in Azerbaijan. The recent European Parliament resolution, June 2013, strongly condemned the detention of opposition leader and presidential candidate Ilgam Mammadov, and calling for his immediate and unconditional release is a welcome step, but further efforts are needed in order to end arbitrary arrests and bogus charges. About the standard of the past election and the present pre-election stage. As has been observed by the OSCE, who is on a different state international organization, election from 2008 and after never matched the standard, international standard. What's mean? International standard of what? Is the standard of democracy, means that there could be election in Azerbaijan, but not democratic election. This has been stated by OSCE, monitoring election from 2008 and after. The preliminary steps of the pre-election stage in the current time in Azerbaijan is still not matching a democratic standard. I'm not worried to use the word, because standard without adjective means nothing. It's a standard of everything, a standard of nothing. And this is a key point, and is an interest of the European Union country members and the European Union citizens. Because if we are going to see what kind of rankings is regarding Azerbaijan in the world, from many sources, that is not the European Union source, but considering Transparency International, Corruption 2012 Corruption Perception Index, Azerbaijan is ranked 139th out of 176. Azerbaijan is a member of an important human rights body, including the UN Human Rights Council and the Council of Europe. That means it's committed to follow some and to not commit violation on human rights. In 2002, the position of Human Rights Commissioner was created in Azerbaijan, but this office is generally seen as ineffective. If we are going to freedom press index compiled by Reports Without Borders, which measure the freedom of journalists, news organizations, and bloggers in a given country, ranked Azerbaijan 156th out of 179. Perhaps can be considered not a great performance, but is on the range, as before, on transparency, corruption. And finally, Freedom House stated in the press on 2013, categorized Azerbaijan press as not free and noted the situation is deteriorating. Obviously, anyone can contest this kind of ranking, as any other can contest the rank of Fitch about the stock markets or the solvability of a country. But it's giving us, others are criticized there is no freedom of association and freedom of assembly, as it's happened in this even pre-electoral stage. There is one main point. The European Union have a major interest to enlarge in the future its membership participation. There is a contradictory position, if not a schizophrenic approach by the European Union. Because the ranking that I was quoting for Azerbaijan is more or less very similar to the one of Belarusia. What is happening is that the European Union strongly criticize and have more or less no contact with Belarus. On the same time, we can say that Azerbaijan is more or less on the top of the preferred list of the European Union. And the European Union have a target, as it seems is a shared target by Azerbaijan, to reaching a partnership and cooperation agreements. They are undergoing negotiations between European Union and Azerbaijan. I don't think that Azerbaijani governments or authority of member of parliament can be so naive to think that Europe will evaluate only their needs and their needs for energy at good price without taking care and strongly request Azerbaijan to fulfill their obligation, the obligation who is given to them to get access from the Council of Europe, to be part of the Council of Human Rights. That's they have to follow obligation, not to UNPO, not to an individual member of this parliament, not to a European institution. The target is to reach in some time, because it's not simple. Someone was quoting Serbia. Serbia have to accomplish many steps in order to get this status. And if I considering the ranking that I quoted before, it will take a lot of time for Azerbaijan to be admitted. If there is one point, it is Azerbaijan that should change. Not that Europe will change their own by law. It's Azerbaijan who have not to violate human rights, to run a standard democratic election, to not to release political prisoners, to get a freedom of press and association. That is the element of the dialogue. If not, Azerbaijan can say, okay, all of those problems, all of those things is nothing for us. We don't care, simply. What kind of dialogue can be between Azerbaijan and the European Union? That is my question, is a question that I do for the participant. And finally, I want to say a couple of things of the bizarre manner to make a question to someone before that he had to speak. It's pretty unusual. You assume that I was thinking something and you are sentencing about me or my interest on disrupt the national unity of Azerbaijan. Really sorry. This report is a report, it's not me. Report of the organization. Yes, it's a report. is in focusing many things in which that Azerbaijan is not fulfilling their obligation that is requested by be part of the Council of Europe. If you know what that means, you will know that this report is quite very soft. It's a report who tend to a dialogue with Azerbaijan, exactly the opposite of what you start to attribute on my thinking. Now I tell you what I think. The question of protection of minority have nothing to do with separatism. There are many countries in the European Union who will never be able in the past to protect their own minority and the rights of their own minority without using the European Union, because in the national or regional contest it was impossible to improve the situation to protection of minority. The same it will happen with you. In a future you will get access to and participation to the European Union. But please, don't think that going around sentencing the other people of tricking game to attack to Azerbaijan to and so on. This dialogue that we have today, and dialogue means that different positions, different parts are discussing one issue, not to try to prevail to the other one. That was the question that you made. Now I want to finish, because we are going this way really in a tricky way regarding language and semantic form of terrorism. That means you attribute a significance to some word who doesn't have it. You attribute people, think, or word that they never use. This is a way to not to discuss. This is a way to accusing people and not to try to find a path and a viable solution. Now, I would like to give, and I closing my speech responding. Now we have the first panelist, who is Mr. Azim Mollazadeh, who is a member of parliament from Azerbaijan, president of the Democratic Reforms Party.
Thank you very much. First of all, my first impression about the discussions here. It reminds me Soviet period, black and white vision, good guys, bad guys, we're fighting with communists, all others are good. And I would like to tell you that it is the 21st century, where situation fast is changing. In Azerbaijan, there are dinosaurs from Soviet era. Definitely Soviet type of managers, a lot of them. There are also dinosaurs from opposition, which also fighting with Soviet Union. Despite,
sorry.
Yeah.
Please, could we listen the speaker instead of having another group of debates? No, I know this way to make a lot of mess. But now, if we can not make this kind of mess and let the speaker talk, please.
Thank you. Thank you for silence. And in this situation, I would like to tell you that why Azerbaijan decided of Euro-Atlantic integration. Why in Azerbaijan this issue is an issue of consensus among political parties. You were listening Mr. Gambar, who said that his party thinks that priority for him is the Euro-Atlantic integration. Government party telling about that. Majority of Azerbaijani people see its future in Europe. But it doesn't mean formal membership in NATO, because we very good remember when Georgia and Ukraine applied for membership in NATO, they were response of Putin's tank and nobody defends them. We remember about that NATO was not ready for our membership. We remember very well that when President Yushchenko in Kiev told about the Euro integration and goals of Euro integration, European Union said no chances, nobody is discussing Ukrainian integration to Europe. And we should understand and take into account that this is a process. Why Azerbaijan would like to be a part of European, Euro-Atlantic family? First of all, of the values. I would like to remind you that first secular country in Muslim world were Azerbaijan. Even teachers of Atatürk who created Turkish Republic, were from Azerbaijan, because this idea always historically based in Azerbaijan. And it's an important value of us. I think one of the biggest problems of countries of former Soviet Union, it's lack of democracy, lack of human rights. But you should know that there is a principal difference between Baltic countries, countries of Central Europe, who is now part of EU, NATO, like Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, all of them there, because they never had Holodomor, they never had massacres of 30s or 40. Near Baku, there is an island, a small island. If you will go beneath the sea, there are bones of people, of Azerbaijani intelligentsia, killed by Bolshevik and communist regime. We understand that. And there is a 22nd anniversary of restoration of our independence. Azerbaijani people, there will be discussion about the minority issues, there will be discussion about the rights of so-called not recognized national state. But I would like to remind you that when there were pogroms of Jews in Europe, in Western Europe, in Holland, for example, or in Russia, Jews came to Azerbaijan and lived in peace and brotherhood there. Among them, there were Muslim majority. When there were in Russian Empire a violation of rights of Catholics, Catholics came to Azerbaijan. Polish independence movement at the end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century, based on Baku. They really contributed a lot to development of this country, to culture and European vision of Azerbaijani nation. And immediately when we had a chance start struggle for our independence, we choose a European way of integration, European way of development. Is we achieve it? Not yet. And I would like to remind you a story from Bible about the Moses, when he with his people escaped from Egypt. He was browsing 40 years in desert because he had an idea to come to a new land, not with slaves, but with free people. We just passed half of this way. And Azerbaijan in 92 was the first post-Soviet country which adopted law about the cultural rights, all rights for minorities. Also in 94, it was again readopted, which gave cultural autonomy to all minorities in Azerbaijan. In our party boards, we have Lezgin, Talish, Jews, Russian, and we're proud about that. We're proud that the biggest Russian community in South Caucasus lives in Azerbaijan. And it's an integral part of my country. They are not a fifth column who fighting for Russian interests or Azerbaijani interests. We love that we have multicultural environment, and we're proud about that. And this is the strategic way of Azerbaijani nation, which came from history. Talishs are integral part of Azerbaijan, integral part of Azerbaijani culture, integral part of, we are. That's why telling about the violation of Talish rights or Lezgin rights, it's a serious problem. I would like to touch one important issue. Azerbaijan and Eastern Partnership, and this autumn we will have a summit of Eastern Partnership. And immediately, Guam countries, Georgia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Moldova became target of rude attack to them. Why? Everybody knows that only Azerbaijan has enough economic potential to resist all these pressures. Azerbaijan now investing to Georgia. It's a multi-million project, and it's important for us. Two Georgian biggest taxpayer companies, the state oil company of Azerbaijan and International Bank of Azerbaijan. It's vitally important for us. Vitally important for Azerbaijan, Ukraine, and Ukrainian documents which they're planning to sign in Vilnius. It's very important, but look what's going on. A lot of human rights issue raising immediately in all European environment, attack to Georgia, to Ukraine, to Moldova, Azerbaijan. But last year we had an election in Armenia. One of the candidates, my friend Parvir Ayrikan, was tried to kill. Why they tried to kill Parvir? Because even in Soviet time, when he said that Azerbaijani and Armenians should be together and resist to Russian Empire, the KGB arrested him and expelled from Armenia because they had a plan to divide and rule and create a war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. When Parvir Arikan, during his election campaign, said about the Russian role in conflict and say, Armenians, stop it, unite with Georgia and Azerbaijan, go to war in Europe, they tried to kill him. Shut up was this shoot to Parvir Arikan. Is there a discussion here? No. No, silence. We're expecting from our European friends support of rights of Armenian people who now pushing to again to Russian Empire. Everybody know about the statement of Mr. Putin. He's building Eurasia Union. He now has a custom union, and by pressure, all these countries pushing to go to custom union. We have not enough support from our European friends. We had some support from the United States, but never we had a serious support. Human rights issue, is there a violation? In all communist system, there were more or less violation. Specifically in Soviet part, fraud during the election, rude battle, but changing of, coming also with technologies. Now in Azerbaijan, there is free and fast internet. There is no internet here in building of European Parliament, free for public, but we have a publicly free. You will come to our parliament and you can use internet absolutely free. We could not use internet here in European Parliament. But again, there is a multicolor vision, and we need a multicolor vision. What we need right now, what we're expecting for Europe, why we're coming to Europe and would like to be a part of European family. We more or less economically independent, and we now play an important role in this thing. We more or less participating for security issue in program with NATO, and it's important for all of us. But speaking frankly, is this also making us a target of root attack from evil country? Just last year, in center of Baku, one radical secular writer was killed after the fitwa of Ayatollah Lankarani. Iran tried to create terror act. If you will look to Wall Street Magazine, an interview of former American ambassador, they were planned to kill American ambassador, ambassador of Israel, head of a Jewish community in Azerbaijan. 150 people were arrested. Some of them in a list of political prisoners. But I don't think that this type of people and terror plans of Iran and using terror against Azerbaijan is a political issue. Again, I would like to touch an issue of minorities, especially from Northern Caucasus. Right now, Northern Caucasus is a battlefield. Every day, people dying there. Big empire created a serious problem among all Northern Caucasian nations. Even Vaynaks, Chechenians, and Ingush now in a strong conflict. Divide and rule. If you look to the geography of so-called ethnic conflict of former Soviet Union, it's absolutely coincide with the geography of Russian and Soviet military base. And this military base actively participated in all conflict. There were questions about this 100,000, and I thank Madam for mentioning Azerbaijani refugees, IDP person, but I would like to remind you that one of the biggest and ugliest tragedy of 20th century happened in small Karabakh town, Khojali, when during one night, children, women, elderly people were brutally killed. Do you know why they killed them brutally? Because they ethnically were different. These kids, 2 or 3 years kids, were burnt and killed. There is a book written by brother of Asala leader, Montemelkanyan. He wrote that he was shocked when they burned 12 years Azerbaijani girl because she's Azerbaijani. I think that we should unite all our efforts. And I think that justice for Khojaly should be important for our European colleagues, as a justice for Rwanda, as a justice for Srebrenica. And it's happened here because we're coming to Europe, to our common family, because we need democracy, human rights, rule of law, but nobody giving it like grant, like present. We understand that we need time, and from our European friends, we need only two things: European education, European culture, and please give us a chance to integrate new generation of Azerbaijan to European environment. We need new public managers, political managers, new business managers, ecology, environmental managers, because it's really very important for us. But at the same time, I definitely believe that we don't need revolution. A support for so-called Arabic Spring or something like that show us that there is a serious danger for all of us, for people in Western Europe and for us who live in Southeastern Europe. It's a terror. It's let's say, using religious for political goals. And in our part of the world, this problem is serious. Mr. Gambar said about the Azerbaijani opposition union, and many times I'm raising issue, why Islamic Party and representative of Islamic Party of Azerbaijan together with them. It's creating suspicion. It's creating a situation where they have a publicly lack of support, because we know that Russian, Armenian, and Iranian Union against integration of South Caucasus. Thank you. I'm finishing.
No.
I'm completing. You told more. We moving toward Europe because we're sharing European values. And it's a consensus in Azerbaijan and decision of majority of Azerbaijani people. Thank you very much. And behalf of, Lezgin, Talish of Azerbaijan, Russian and Jews, who are really strongly presented in my party, I would tell you that in Azerbaijan, Lezgins, Avars live economically, socially, politically, culturally, much more better than in Russian Federation, than in Northern Caucasus. When every day they're facing terror, every day they're facing clashes.
Thank you to Mr. Asim Mulazadeh for your speech. And now I'm pleased to give the floor to Pierre Dibban, Political Officer, Eastern Partnership Bilateral Division of External EAS Services. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Although the title of this is What is the Future for the EU-Azerbaijan Relations, let me start from the past, if only because it's much easier to predict than the future. And also somehow because this is the basis for our relations. So I think we can make the separation between the political relations, the technical assistance, and the energy relations we have. From the political point of view, we started with the Partnership and Cooperation Agreement in '96, entry into force in '99. Then the next document is the Neighborhood ENP Action Plan. Okay. And now we're negotiating in 2006, and we've been negotiating the association agreement since July 2010. We have also negotiations on mobility, I would say the visa facilitation and readmission since March 2012. In 2006, we signed an MOU on the Strategic Energy Partnership, which led recently to the choice of TAP for the Western Gas Corridor. And in terms of assistance, we've been going through TASIS till 2006, then ENPI from 2007 to 2013, and from 14 to 20 we will be under a new legal basis, the ENI. That's the past. What are we doing now? Well, we are, as has been said by some speakers, maybe at a slower pace than with other countries, negotiating the association agreement between the EU and Azerbaijan. Not as fully as with Moldova or Ukraine or Georgia, because we cannot negotiate a deep and comprehensive free trade area, because Azerbaijan is not yet member of the WTO, which we deplore. We negotiate visa. We have a deep and I would say closer relation in terms of energy, with Azerbaijan wanting to become a gas hub to Europe, if I quote what I heard recently in Baku. And we are trying to engage in the diversification of the economy and the modernization of the country through the new instruments that we are, in fact, negotiating between Commission, Council, and European Parliament, the future ENI, where we will focus on 3 priorities. And I know that one of the priorities that Azerbaijan would like the EU to cooperate on is education, which goes somehow in the sense of what also has been heard, of a request for helping new generations get closer to the EU. And what is the EU about? Well, I also heard it today. It's about common values. It's about going towards deep democracy. It's about deep and comprehensive free trade. It's about a single market. So basically, it's about all the freedoms, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of thinking, freedom of movement, freedom of trade. It's also about peace. It's about peaceful settlement of conflicts and avoiding new conflicts also. And we have a yearly exercise where we analyze, we assess, the EU assesses the progress that the country makes on this path. We publish in March progress reports for all the countries in the region, in the neighborhood, in fact, because that not only the East, also the Southern countries. And there we explain the weaknesses, the failings, the regresses, the progresses, and this is a complex picture that analyzes the countries. So I also heard that this is a progressive path, and I think the EU recognizes that all those rules, norms, principles cannot be adopted in one day, although they can be adopted quickly, but they need to be implemented fully, which takes much more time. And we regularly encourage the countries, including Azerbaijan, to live up to its commitments and to constantly improve its progress on this difficult path. The EU, not being a monolithic animal, the EU is something which is complex. We have the European Parliament and people voting one way, the other way. You have Council of Europe, you have the member states, you have the Commission, you have the EAS, and not everybody has exactly the same opinion or the same objectives in the relation with a given country. So it is not abnormal to hear one branch of the EU criticizing Azerbaijan for not going fast enough on human rights, and another one congratulating it for signing and enabling the Southern Corridor. And I think we will continue, as long as our institutions are as complex as they are, to have difficulty being very consistent in the messages we come up with. I also heard that we should try to be consistent when we judge different countries, and I believe that the fact we produce all those reports at the same time go into this direction. But being a very, very small part of the European Union, I believe that you cannot hold me responsible for any discrepancies that we have had in the past, that we have now, and that I'm sure we will continue having in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Liman, to lead on the path of the question of this panel, the ways forward the EU-Azerbaijan relation. Now, we're pleased to give the floor to Dr. Enver Kisriev, Head of Department for Caucasus, Center for Regional and Civilization Studies at the Russian Academy of Science. Please, you have the floor.
Спасибо, председатель.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dear members, my report touches upon the civil society and minorities in Azerbaijan. I'm talking to you because I have a desire to tell you about the problems that lesbians and other minorities are faced with in Azerbaijan Republic. I'm doing that in order to find a solution to this problem. Caucasus, as you know, is a very polyethnic region of the world. Here, a lot of peoples who speak different languages with different religious backgrounds live for a long time. And within the traditional society, those aspects didn't have an importance. Every day, ethnical societies talk to each other, and every Caucasus person could speak more than one language. He had neighbors, business partners, and sometimes even relatives within other ethnical groups. Lesbians is one of the groups, and its history is very rich. They live on this territory for a long time. The first written documents are found in this region, and there we can see that the peoples that live in this region is one of the Narsko-Dagestan ethnical group. Lesbians live in the mountains, starting from Caspian Mountains to the Caspian Valley. 200 years ago, after North Caucasus became a part of Russian Federation, through administrative regioning, the river became a border, and it remains a border during a communist regime. So Seymour became a trans-border region because Dagestan and Armenia. But at that time, this river was a theoretical region because we all lived in one country, USSR. But after the collapse of the USSR and Azerbaijan became an independent country, lesbians started to be divided by a political border between two separate countries, Azerbaijan and Dagestan Republic, which is a part of Russian Federation. One people for which River Seymour was a connection became divided by a state border. The situation is also difficult because Azerbaijan government, pursuing the policy of Azerbaijan development, chose the Turks' idea. So Azerbaijan is pursuing the policy of integration of youth through a Turks language, which is a state language of Azerbaijan. Of course, there's a desire from the government so that all people think of themselves as of Azerbaijan nationals and forget about their other ethnical background. But Azeri political doctrine doesn't want to suppose that. The ruling elite decided to pursue the ethnocide policy, the annihilation of all the other ethnical groups and their integration into a common nation. I'm talking about ethnocide in order to fully use the meaning of this word. Policy of Azerbaijan is a pure ethnocide. I would like to explain what I mean. Lesgin, Talish, or any other ethnical member is not pursued, is not considered as a person in Azerbaijan, although he is a full citizen in Azerbaijan. He will have absolutely no problems in solving material or other problems, but only if this person doesn't disclose his nationality. I mean, being lesbian or some other minority. That is not true. You're being separatistic. That is absolutely not true. My wife is lesbian. You shouldn't listen to that. There's no such problems in Azerbaijan. Shame on you. Shame on you.
Sorry. We say that we are trying to dialogue and not to...
The Russian provocation.
That's anyone, there is no provocation at all, not on any part. Simply, there are different opinions. And you should become familiar with different opinions. Anyone have his own opinion and perhaps his own truth. Now, let the speaker finish. Then, there are for now 6 requests. Please. No, you ask. You are the 6th in the order of the people who already request the floor. We hope there will be sufficient time. Without interrupting, you will let the speaker finish, and there will be more chance to you to speak. Thank you.
I completely understand your emotional response to the topic of my speech. I totally understand it, because there's nothing more wrong than not to let your own people to use its own language, publish newspapers in its language, have TV programs in minority languages. That is not true. In Azerbaijan, there are newspapers and theaters and others. It's easy to say, but you still need to prove it. I would like to continue. According to the definition by the working group, by the UNESCO group on original peoples, ethnocide means exactly that. Ethnocide is when people forget its background and totally integrates into the nation. I think no Azeri citizen denies the fact that he's a citizen, and probably he's even proud of his country, but only if he doesn't disclose his ethnical origins. In Azerbaijan, there's only one newspaper that comes out, which is edited in 3 languages, but it's edited on private terms. If you let lesbians to have as many papers as they want in their own language, If you have a radio channel or TV channel in Lesgian language, then it would be a different story. Here I'm talking about the root of ethnocide. It's to affect historical memory of peoples in order to change it. Normally, when we talk about the formation of some nation, we're talking about historical development and linguistic development. According to all those points, ethnical minorities are constantly under constraint of governmental bodies. The border between Azerbaijan and Dagestan, for relatives that live on both sides of the river, became a border that they can't breach. Hrahuba, which is a Lesgian village, and its citizens, they're situated on the Azerbaijan territory. In 2010, when the documents on borders were signed, they decided to keep the Russian nationality, so they were compulsory chased from this territory to the territory of the Russian Federation. According to the scientists and experts, at least 500,000 of Lesgin live in Azerbaijan, but according to statistics, it's only 170,000, and they didn't become. It didn't become more in the last 10 years. During the communist rule, if you don't mention your real nationality, Lesgin or some other, it was considered as a violation of communist values. Of course, as I said before, if a person doesn't demonstrate its ethnicity, if they some sort of forgets about their ethnicity, then the person won't have any problems living in Azerbaijan. For example, there are rumors that Minister of Defense is a Lesgin. Of course, you say that here, but it would never be officially published.
Toward a conclusion for the time
I'm
reason.
sorry. Недавно известный азербайджанский
Recently, a very famous Azeri person, Abbas Abbasov, head of Azerbaijan Cultural Autonomic Body in Moscow, was in Dagestan with a friendly visit dedicated to memorable dates of combating Persian Shah in 1741-1743. It was a very long time ago. Even then, the Azerbaijani newspaper published terrible critics because he came to Dagestan because the Azerbaijani Shah because he's Persian. But the newspaper called him Azerbaijan, not Persian Sheikh.
We have the habit in this house to have a polite dialogue. That means no shouting. You just wait till the speaker is finished and then they ask for the floor. And it's the chair who gives the floor and it's not you who decide individually whether you take the floor. Okay, thank you. You can continue, please.
орган правящей партии
The newspaper Yeni Azerbaijan, which is a body of ruling party, called Nadir Shah an Azerbaijanian. They called him a betrayer, and Dagestani people were called the Lesbian Dagestan separatists. Even if Dagestani people became separatists for Azerbaijan, then how does it feel to be lesbian in Azerbaijan? That is, even if for the ruling party considers Dagestan people as separatists. At the moment, it's impossible to overcome the information blockade. At the moment, ethnical nationalism is at high level. People want to know their history, to know their language, respect their culture. That's why it's impossible to forbid national minorities to have their own papers, to learn their language. It's impossible to close all those sources. That's why I want you to understand that it might be immoral, but a very serious pressure that is on the shoulders of ethnic minorities in Azerbaijan. We want you to know that minorities' life in Azerbaijan is very difficult. We're not talking about life aspect in Azerbaijan. We're not talking about rights of those minorities. I'm not talking about historical rights that can be transferred to political identification. I'm talking about political rights of people. Before Putin's visit in Azerbaijan, 3 lesbian people were arrested, and 2 of them were Russian citizens. They were relatives of our head of our center. 3 people were arrested in Azerbaijan, relatives of head of the Center for Regional and Civilization Studies. It shows how you're going to solve problems of minorities. Спасибо. Итак, пожалуйста.
I'm sorry, I took the position before. Now, the first request that I received from is just I know some names. The first was Mr. Karimov, the second Mr. Muradov, the fourth is the gentleman there, the fifth is there, the sixth is the gentleman who was yelling before, the seventh is the gentleman there, and the young lady there. Now we are 8. We have 13 minutes. Yeah, you are in the list too. I don't remember your position. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Karimov. Okay, if you like to. Please, if you can. She's not listening. Yes, if you can listen. If you can make your question, tell your name and address to whom is addressed your question, please.
Illustration to my speech, Russian attack. Я не иду, я сейчас подойду. У меня хороший воспитание.
That's an illustration to my speech. Russian attack.
Уважаемые друзья, уважаемые...
Dear friends,
can you please identify yourself, because
Что они говорят?
we don't know.
Назовите себя.
Ну скажите, да мы же Керимов Ариф Пашаевич, президент Федеральной Лезгинской национально-культурной...
I'm the president of Lesgin Cultural Autonomic Center. Dear friends, I have followed the discussion and I heard different opinions. I want to tell you something And I want our Azeri friends to understand us correctly. Don't blame us. Myself, as a head of Lesbian Federal Autonomy, I am not against Azeri culture. We don't mean you harm. We understand the state of Azerbaijan, understand its relation with Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia. Did you forget the whole history?
In English, or can you put on the headphones? No, yes, I'm terrible sorry, but I'm trying to have a little bit of order in this dialogue. I was not particularly fond of your idea to sit here because most of the people are just sitting there, and you are not now delivering a total new contribution from here. So my question to you would be, can you limit yourself to 1 minute and have a question to the panelists or an urgent appeal? I don't matter. But please limit yourself to 1 minute, because after 1 minute we will go to the next question.
Спасибо. Я и так не...
Thank you very much. I would like to tell to our partners, our neighbors, to representatives of Azerbaijan country, lesbian people are not competitive. It's not competition for Azerbaijani people. As soon as you understand that, the better it would be for our country. And Mr. Murad said that he's independent. Of course, I would like him to be not only independent as a deputy, but also as a person. The force of the state is not in finance. Dear Murad, you're too young to know such things. The force of the state is the unity of its members, of the minorities. And how this unity is reflected is a different story. When Russia was a huge nuclear power, Russia had missiles and...
I limit your speaking time to 1 minute, but that's not the only reason. I don't... No, 1 minute. 1 minute is 1 minute, and I don't like to have a lot of allegations around the table that nobody can control.
30 секунд.
So I would like...
30 секунд.
No.
30 seconds, please. 30 seconds.
And Mr. Bustakin will go to the next.
30 секунд, прошу слова. 30 секунд.
Sorry, you had 4 minutes already.
I just want to know 30 seconds, just my last speech.
Дагестанский...
I want to say just one thing. The Dagestan people have a state newspaper, have their own theater. We have our own university. Please show the newspaper. What is that? Where were you raised, mister?
Okay,
the same rules are for the oral speaker. There is 1 minute. If not, we cannot repeat the same. Mr. Muradov, you have the floor for your question.
Well, thank you very much. You saw how the gentleman attacked on me, and it's very intolerant approach. And this is remind me my question to Mr. Buzdashin, that what is the relation of the Azerbaijani president election and national minority invited here, the separatists invited here? This was my question. Coming back to Mr. Gambarov's question to me, when they applaud people here to him, that why he is sitting with separatists. Because you, a member of the party who invite this gentleman and another one who jump on the tribune from the same party. That was my issue, that if we come here to discuss the president election, we should discuss it, and we're ready for that. But we are not ready sitting in opposite to the separatists and discussing how they divide my country. This was my question, Mr. Gambarov. And my last question to Mr. Pierre Dubman, who leading the process of the association agreement negotiation between EU and Azerbaijan. What do you think about the last development with the Armenia, do you think it's possible for them after that to be in the same position on the European trade agreement? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Murabo. I'll ask Mr. Diban if he... No, you did yourself. For now you end your time, please, Mr. Diban. Thank you.
Well, very quickly, it was a big surprise for us when Armenia suddenly in 3 days changed its mind about 3.5 years of negotiations. I think it's been clearly expressed that the association agreement with the trade part is a single document, and that if you don't sign one major part of the document, you cannot sign the rest. So this is extremely clear for us, and of course, that's a kind of window of opportunity for other countries in the region to take as much responsibility and to negotiate as quickly as possible to reach other agreements with the European Union.
No, that question was not addressed to you, sorry. It was, sorry, it was addressed to me. If you consent, I can give a brief 2-second answer. The question that election is regarding all the citizens, minority, women, men, and so on. That is perfectly normal. That the question of minority is part of any election in any country. Thank you. You have not now. I am pleased to give the floor to the gentleman with the black jacket there.
Yusibov Eldeniz. Ben Hollanda'dan gelmişim. Siyasi muhacirəm. Ben burada bir şey sizə çatdırmaq istəyirəm ki.
Thank you very much. I'm coming from Netherlands. I want to stress upon that elections before were falsified, and if the same will happen again, and European Parliament will act in the same way like before, it's not appropriate. So my question, are you going to act as you acted previously? You are talking about European integration. But see, before we have 2,000 immigrants in Europe, and now this number has grown so these years. Bir dakika zahmet olmazsa. Thank you very much. Sabik Budagov, I'm coming from Netherlands. I am representing European Democratic Movement of Azerbaijan. I want to mention that Abulfaz Elchibey, who was the first democratically elected president, he was the first one who signed a law regarding the minorities in Azerbaijan. You are saying that minorities have some difficulties in Azerbaijan. That's not true. All people in Azerbaijan have difficulties.
In Belgium. Well, thank you very much, Mr. MEP, Mr. Gerbrandy, for organizing this debate, which is called Azerbaijan's presidential elections. What future for the land of fire? when you look at the event, the name of the event, you think that there will be really good debate where you have invited the leader from opposition, where we have the representative of the parliament of the Azerbaijan. What we see here, also the representatives of the parliament who are sitting backside, we witness the artificial inflation or artificial imposing another absolutely different subject related to the minority issues, to this very subject of presidential elections. What is the reason of having this subject artificially here in this debate? Can you please explain us? With all my respect to you, what is your intention standing behind it? I mean, is the candidates, I'm lesbian, my nationality, Azerbaijani lesbian, and the diplomat. And we have many, many officials, lesbians, who have the highest positions at the current Azerbaijani government.
Thank you. Your time is expired. Now I ask Mr. Gerben to answer to you.
I will give you a frank and clear answer. Minorities are always an emotional issue, also within the EU. I have colleagues from Catalonia, from the Basque region, etc., etc. It's a very emotional issue. Quite often, it's also an issue of human rights. These elections are not only about democracy, they're also about respect of civil liberties, human rights, and freedom of media. For that reason, when I was approached by UNPO to organize this conference jointly, I said yes. I think it's an important issue, and it's an important issue to discuss as well. And like all emotional issues, it should be possible to debate it openly and with respect for each other's views. It doesn't mean that my views are the same as everybody that has been speaking at this podium, not at all. But I do believe that this House, this European Parliament, should be the stage for these kind of dialogues. And I do not take side, I'm just staging a dialogue. And I thank you for being part of that, but I'm not taking side.
Sorry, you have not the floor. Please, the gentleman on the fourth row, you have 1 minute for your question. Yes, you.
My name is Leon Cook from the European Azerbaijan Society. I have a minute, so I'll be very brief. As an organization that welcomes the integration of Azerbaijan closer to Europe, I welcome today's debate. It's a legitimate theme, and I'm glad it's happening. That said, for someone who's proud to be associated with Azerbaijan, I've never sat in a session in the European Parliament quite like this. It's a shame that Mr. Nichols has left the building, because my concern is about the legitimacy of standards of one country versus that of another. Armenia, it's been touched upon here today, had a presidential candidate that was shot. The actual reports from the Council of Europe and other organizations afterwards said it was severely flawed in terms of democratic standards. However, if I was to make a comparison of media clippings of an election that's already taken place compared with one that is about to take place, it would be a pamphlet versus Tolstoy's War and Peace. There is severe disparity in terms of the level of attention between the two countries. And my question to Mr. Gerbrandy is, while it is, again, legitimate that this debate is taking place, I've had a look at your websites. Can you tell me, in terms of your position as Vice Chair of Euronest, what you said about the Armenian elections? And if you didn't so, why not? Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm using the same standards to all countries. I have no personal interest in the Caucasus region. I'm one of the few Western European members of this House who have interest in the region at all. I have no personal interest. I have no links to any organizations, besides, of course, my political friends through the Liberal alliance that we're having. But I have no double agenda, and I have no hidden agenda. The reason that I'm organizing this event is very clear. We're having the presidential elections next week. That's very clear. For me, it's very simple. I do not have the time to organize events on all presidential elections in all Caucasus countries. That doesn't mean that the Liberal group in this House is not organizing events on almost every important election. I don't know if we organized one on the Armenian presidential election, but I wouldn't be surprised if we did. So there is no bias from my side. I have no particular interest in any particular country. I just wanted to organize this linked to the presidential elections of next week. My final word, and I'm taking the floor now because we have translation till 5 o'clock. I'd love to continue for another half an hour, but we will not have any translation. And considering the people in this room, that would be a huge problem. So I'm afraid that we have to conclude. I thought beforehand that 2.5 hours would be even too much time for this debate. It turns out to be not even sufficient because there are still many hands going up. I heard a lot. I heard a lot of interesting contributions. There were contributions that I found less interesting. Some were more interesting. I very much liked what our colleague here said about black and white. It's not only a matter of black and white. My experience so far in the Caucasus region is that black is not always black. You have, I don't know how many versions of black, and I don't know how many versions of white. So facts are never facts in this region, and in the political dialogue, nobody expects or accepts the facts of the other side. Nevertheless, I think it was worthwhile having this dialogue, having this debate, having this meeting. I thank all participants, even those who had a hard time refraining from having a less polite contribution. I know it's also part of democracy. I see it in my own country. I see it in my own party as well. I'm myself originally from a minority in the Netherlands, a Frisian minority. In the Middle Ages, we used to cut off the heads of all those who were not part of our minority, but now we are a fully integrated part of the Netherlands. We still believe that we have the right to speak our own language. That is fully accepted by the national government. I do notice that the language is silently dying out simply because people are stopping to speak it, but I'm afraid that's a natural phenomenon. Once again, I would like to thank you for your participation, thank Mr. Bustakin for co-hosting this event with me and co-organizing it, and thanking all those of my staff and your staff who have worked very hard to organize this. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time.